I remember when I first started in kitchens 4,000 years ago. It keeps getting longer, doesn't it? When I first started filming for YouTube, I think it was 1,000 years ago, but it's a bit longer than that. Anyway, there is a point to this story. It was the times when the wonderful chefs like Michel Gerard and Paul Bocuse and people like that were putting out books. There was only one problem: the books never bloody worked. And I found out later that I think it was Michel Gerard, his wife was doing the book. So they sort of didn't actually quite make it. You made the recipe, and I can make any recipe work. I reckon I can anyway. And you'd make it and you think there's something missing here. And then you'd go to their restaurant and you'd have the actual dish. And it was nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. Those are the days when I used to go to France every year and rush around those 3-star Michelin restaurants. Don't do it any longer. But anyway, those were the days. So, this recipe is from a Neil Perry book. Well, sort of, I must admit. I can't help myself, I do change things. But his recipes always work. Always work, and they're good. He's got a good feel for food, Neil Perry. He's run some wonderful restaurants. It's not just the restaurants though, he really does have a good feel for it. Lovely flavours. That Spice Temple, oh, what a restaurant. And I also remember, and I think I may have mentioned it before, he started off in Sydney. Well, I don't know whether he started off in Sydney with this exact one, but one of his very first was Blue Water Grill. And I loved that restaurant. The food was very simple. As he said later on, the reason it was simple was because he hardly had any equipment and the kitchen was tiny. So he had a big grill and not much else. So he'd do lovely things like wonderful butters and salsas and all those kind of things, and lovely salads and things to make his plain grills appear fancy and taste good. And they did. I always remember he did a beautiful swordfish with curry butter. That's what he still does, curry butter actually. I see it in his books. Anyway, let's just have a look here. What I've got in there: 1 medium onion, 1 medium carrot, 1 fairly large stalk of celery, 3 cloves of garlic, and a couple of good sized full rashers of bacon. All diced, all small, and we're just going to cook that until they're reasonably tender. Now I know I've said this to you before, but I do love talking about books that don't work. I love recipes that say cook it until it's tender for 3 minutes. Well, it takes longer than that, kid. Now, I don't want it soft, but I do want it, to start the cooking process. So I'd say about 5-7 minutes. And what I've got over here, about 500 grams of duck. Now, I've used the breast, but Mr. Perry did recommend using boned legs. They didn't have any at the poulterer, so I'm using breast. So there's about 500 grams of that, and I've diced it pretty bloody small, you can see that, and fat and all. But first of all, let's cook my vegetables for 3 minutes. Oh, I'm big silly, for 5 to 7 minutes. And they're very small, and neat and tidy. That's the whole thing about cooking, is that, if you're making a nice dish with lots of veggies in, make sure the veggies are nice and neat and tidy. Doesn't matter if they're big pieces, that's fine, as long as they're all the same. All right, guys, this is looking quite good now, and I'm going to throw the duck in, and we're just going to seal that off, so that'll take a few more minutes. Actually, when I was talking about the Spice Temple before, which I love, and I always loved Rockpool. The original Rockpool was stunning when Neil was actually on the stoves himself in the very early days. When I had the Fish Cafe in Sydney, he opened that, and I think he did it with, when I say did it with, he was in conjunction with John Sussman, who is the fish king, and he was supplying him with all this wonderful seafood. So that was the original one. But anyway, the point, see, I digress, don't I? I go off on a tangent. The point is that he doesn't own those restaurants any longer. He's got a new place called Margaret, which I haven't made it to yet, but I'm going to, because I'm told it is a very fancy pants bistro. And I'm also told it's bloody marvellous. So I'm looking forward to that. And what we will next do, add a cup of red wine. Now I'm going to use the red wine that I'm actually serving with this, because it's only for 1 or 2, so I don't need a whole bottle, do I, left over. So 1 cup of red wine, 1 cup of stock, any kind of stock. This is a veal broth, 1/4 cup of sherry vinegar. If you haven't got sherry vinegar, a good red wine's fine. There we go, and we're going to reduce that by about 1/2, and that will certainly take more than 3 minutes. Right, now we've reduced that by 1/2, and I've got 2 cans of diced tomatoes, so that's 800 grams altogether, and we'll throw that in. And what we're then going to do is we're going to cook that, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, until it's thick and fragrant. Now, I love saying thick and fragrant. You know what I mean. You can smell when it's ready. A bit like the Italians who always say that when you cook a pasta sauce, you cook it by the nose. You can smell when the next step. I'm not very good at that, but the idea is great. Now, my pappardelle is looking bloody good. It's actually a local version. Australian family owned and made. Guzzies. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry, Mr. Guzzi, if that's not how you pronounce it. I got close. Now, the sauce. Now, that looks magnificent, doesn't it? That's a beautiful looking sauce. Now, I'll just taste it, just for seasoning, because I didn't put any salt or pepper in it. It needs both. Needs both. Quite a bit of pepper. Give it a bit of a kick. And it needs plenty of salt. Always be a bit careful, with your bacon, because sometimes bacon can be very, very salty. Obviously that's not, because that does need a bit of salt. The pappardelle, let's drain it. Now I'm going to mix the sauce into this. You can, of course, it's up to you. You can, of course, put the sauce on the top. I sometimes like that, but with this one I think I'm going to enjoy it all mixed together. Now, the other thing about it, which I must mention, is I must admit when I first saw the recipe and I saw that he was leaving the fat on the duck, I thought, oh, that's going to be tough and chewy. It doesn't. You cook it slowly in the sauce and it's beautiful. So don't get paranoid about that. If, like me, you're a bit greedy, just a little bit more sauce on the top. I'm a great believer in Parmesan. I love Parmesan. And to go with this, a Pinot Noir, because it's always hard to match tomato and red wine, but Pinot Noir seems to work. And Mr. Prentice, our wine expert, said, don't you bloody dare buy anything from Central Otago. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Prentice, I love this. This is for the Remarkables, which is a terrific wine. So you can get nicked. So, Pinot Noir, tomato, and that beautiful duck pasta. Guys, to show your support for my channel and to keep in the loop, subscribe. It's easy to do, and don't forget, it's free. Okay, cheers.